Hello and welcome to my podcast, Soul Expansion and Inspiration. This is Series 3, Episode 5, and my name is Allie O'Shea. Today, I would like to give a very warm welcome to my guest, Keith Gregory. Hello, Keith. How are you doing?
I'm really well, Allie. Thank you for having me on. Good to be here.
Fantastic. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
So you are an energy artist, a soul coach, an advanced energy healer, and originator of the Initiatory Journey to Awaken Your Sacred Masculine. Wow.
Which is not gender specific, by the way.
Yeah, which was one of my first questions to you, obviously, when we first chatted. Like, what's all this about? But we will get into that. Because it is a different terminology, than a lot of people would use. So we will get into all of that. But first of all, you're in the USA. Whereabouts in the USA are you? And I know you've got a big move coming up as well.
I'm in Olympia, Washington, which is in the Puget Sound. Seattle is north of me about an hour and a half. So I'm right next to the Puget Sound, which is next to Olympic Peninsula, which is next to the Pacific. So I'm in Washington State.
Okay, and you're moving, aren't you, to Hawaii? Am I correct?
To Kauai, Hawaii, which is specific. Each island has its own vibe, its own personality, its own character, and Kauai is the oldest of the Hawaiian chain. It's very creatrix, very strong goddess frequency there. Yeah.
Is that a reason why you're moving there?
I'm sure. This is a soul move, and I think anything that anybody does now that is connected to their heart, is aligned with their spiritual guidance, everything is a soul move, and it's the right time at the right moment of my life to go. Correct.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Okay. And when are you moving?
I'm moving in 12 days, the 28th of October.
Okay.
On the new moon. Yeah.
Very good. So you'll be a busy boy packing up in the next little while.
I am. And I've learned, as have you, you're a mom, right? 2 kids?
Yeah.
You've learned how to do things more efficiently, more streamlined, with hopefully less bother or to do. And I've learned over the years, being a nomad of sorts, a sadhu, how to streamline. And that really is a reflection of how I live my life, to be as streamlined and aligned as I possibly can be.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about your spiritual journey before we get into the actual work that you do. I know that you're a clairvoyant and you're also a medical intuitive. When did you realize these gifts? Did you realize them as a child, or did they come to you later in life?
They were, as with most of us, as you know, as a mom, we're all intuitive as children. Mm-hmm. We're all empathic. We feel before we think and understand our reality. I think some people have more of an accent in the intuitive realm. It was a major pain in the butt growing up. It was brutal because I always felt other people's feelings were my responsibility, and that I felt what they felt in relationship to me specifically. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know proper boundaries. I didn't even know what that possibly meant. I didn't know how to manage my field consciously until many years later, when I went to healing school in Sedona, Arizona, at the School of Energy Mastery in 1996, so they begin to get a handle on how to manage my own energy field.
I wanted to ask you as well, because you were so empathic, how do you use the general methods when you are now helping people heal on their spiritual and soul journey? How do you protect yourself so that you are not absorbing their energies or their issues, etc.? Mm-hmm. Do you use general methods that most healers would use, or do you have your own ones that you've kind of practiced along the way?
I think a little bit of both, although I can't say definitively as to what healers use. However, and this is really core to my work in my life, Allie, it's to be in my alignment, my vertical power current, my soul stream, my verticality. And speaking energy anatomy here, it's commonly known that we have 7 primary chakras in our etheric field that extend up and extend down.
Yes.
And the 8th chakra is when you put your hands above your head, and I use this often with the work I do to connect to my soul star or 8th chakra, to lock in, as well as below my bum, below where I stand, 18 inches below the surface of the earth. This is true for everybody. This is basic human energy anatomy. To lock into my earth star and soul star simultaneously, that creates not a bubble, let's say a diamond or a unit, that's held and fastened to these energetic points of reference that I've learned out of necessity create an in the world but not of the world awareness. So I don't automatically gush or be gushed upon by other people, certainly in challenging situations, emotional moments, certainly healing, and being as a facilitator, it's essential that I maintain my alignment and, dare I say, sovereignty, to not fall into their issues, their energy, but to remain autonomous to a degree and aligned with my higher insight or guidance. Whenever I work, as an aside, perhaps we'll speak of this in a moment, I only work from my higher self and your higher self connection. We don't do this interview, darling, unless I get a yes from your higher self that it's an invitation and it's a go. Because I spent lifetimes in the course of my healing and awakening running my personality ego games.
Right.
And one of the asides about an old soul is that we're slow learners. It takes a long time to play through my bag of tricks until there's nothing left but my alignment to source, and as important, my alignment with the earth beneath me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So going back to your spiritual journey and the start of it then, because you're now a healer and an energetic healer, and you talk very much about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, which we will get into later on. But I want to know where your journey started for you that got you into this work in the very first place.
You know, this is the amazing thing about spirit, is that it also reflects and has to reflect in the very physicality, in the very really the trials and tribulations of our life. It's all interdigitated. I was very, 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 very blessed to grow up on the south side of Chicago. I was born in the late 50s. So I was in public school in the only neighborhood, the first neighborhood that allowed Black kids into the public school system in mass through busing and integration, which was one of the first hallmark acts in the crusade for equality in the Civil Rights Act, was to start bringing kids into the environment of quote unquote establishment or white society, quote unquote. And these kids, I swear to you, I was 8 or 9, 7 or 8. These kids couldn't hardly spell their name. They were still Negroes back then. This is Chicago, which was an amazingly hardcore racist city.
Right.
Martin Luther King, who marched there, said there was a greater intensity of hatred in Chicago when he marched than even back home in the South. So from one year, I was a normal middle-class white kid going to school, public school. The next year, I was getting my ass kicked going to school, being called a whitey, a cracker, and a honky. And I had to learn how to get along, Allie. I had to learn how to not get my butt kicked. I had to learn how to relate. I had to learn the one thing that connects everybody, and that's the heart space. It's the only place where all differences, disagreements dissolve, potentially, if you attend to it and you listen and you know, if you just treat people with respect and kindness, yet not be afraid, those kids would get their butts kicked, or too cocky or too arrogant. Those kids would get their butts kicked. But if I contain myself, dare I say, with an inner authority from my heart, and this has dovetailed perfectly into the work I do, which is about awakening the heart space.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
You too.
And have you experienced external factors of other spiritual leaders that have also inspired you on your journey?
Indeed. And fortunately, grace and fate. I have an older brother, 5 years older. He was my mentor at the time. I really looked up to him. And when he was going into his spiritual quest in the late 60s, which was also kind of generational in America, I would tag along, 5 years older. When he was 18, I was 13. We would go to ashrams and temples and storefront Baptist churches in the south side of Chicago, and I would just follow along. And as he got into an Eastern Hindu teacher, Guru Maharaji, I took initiation as well. I was 13 in 72.
What
and fell right into
what
it.
exactly is that?
Pardon?
What exactly is that?
What do you mean? Is what?
The integration into Maserati. I don't know.
Guru Maharaji. This was the teacher at the time. He was a childhood guru. This is in the early 70s. He came over from India. My brother got involved, took me to the ashram. I felt an instant affinity with that culture, interestingly enough, Hindus, and meditating. It was really a first nature thing. I was chanting in an ashram in the summer of 72. I was visiting my grandmother who lived there, and I was chanting in an ashram, and all of a sudden, Allie, there was like, damn, a golden balloon of bliss over my head that burst, and it's called a soul merge. I'm still trying to get back to that feeling. I mean, it was complete saturation and immersion with this golden light. I don't know. I've smoked, I've drank, I've screwed, I've earned, I've spent everything in the world to come back to that simple feeling. And that's why my life has streamlined, because that's the best thing I ever felt in my life.
Right. Yeah.
That connection to source.
Quite often, I've heard a few of my friends talk about something similar where they've had this feeling, and it's what you're talking about, and trying to get back to that place. It's like that feeling of euphoria, of just pure and utter state of bliss. And quite often people go through that as a child and then keep searching and searching for it as an adult. And sometimes it'll come and sometimes maybe it won't, but it is about the connection to source, and it's about all that vibrational work that we do to get into the heart space and to connect with our inner being and our soul and our source. So yeah, it's a story that I've heard very similar before in that regard.
There's a saying that breakthrough comes after breakdown, and equally as euphoric was that moment, was equally as challenging and deep was my shadow that I had to address, embrace, encounter, invite into my heart. This was only done after years and years and years. I spent the whole decade of the 80s bartending with a restaurant in New York. This is in New York, in South Beach, Miami. New York was a wild, wild place in the Lower East Side. The Rolling Stones did a video in my brother's bar, Waiting on a Friend. I was in that video. I was in the bar getting high with, anyway, that's the story to itself. But the irony and the profundity, and I think this is true with everyone else I've heard, unless you were born like just on another level. But most of us have had to find our way through our pain body, our woundology. Is that I've learned to do what I want to do, Allie, from having done things that I no longer want to do again. Mm-hmm. And my mother, radiant, lovely woman, was an alcoholic.
Right.
Due to the broken heart with my father, who was a lovely, lovely man, who was an alcoholic, or was an angerholic. So I was in utero. I was in the utero lounge in conception and in gestation. And with addiction on any level, certainly with substance, there's always one offspring, at least one who carries that beast of a blessing. And of my two older brothers and myself, I'm the only one who's I have a Pisces moon, which says something, strong intuitive and addictive properties, qualities. And it's all because I didn't feel like I was lovable. I didn't feel like, I felt that I had offended God somehow on some deep level, that I was cast out of heaven. And the only way I could earn my way back in was to punish myself, to make myself worthy. Not a really good strategy there. And had to heal that part of me that blamed me for not being lovable. It's like a snake eating its tail. After a while, you just lock into this fused knot of sadness or struggle or separation. So I've learned to do what I want to do, having healed or addressed, I'm not going to say healed, but to have addressed those places that kept me from being present and happy and fulfilled. And that's been the basis of how I live my life and the work I've done and do with others as a result.
Okay. And do you think that you felt like that because your mother was drinking with you in the womb and you came out as, I don't know what they call it, an addicted baby or
Fetal alcohol.
Yes.
Wow.
So do you feel that you felt like that because of that? And do you feel that, did you feel, even though it's probably not the case, that your mother didn't love you because she did that while you were in the womb, and so that you projected all of this out as a child and growing up then?
Right. You know, I don't know if you've been around, you're a woman, you live in a whole nother world, never had kids myself, so I don't know a lot of things that you know, obviously, but I've found that on a soul level, that we create our primary caregivers to outpicture our core wounds. And not just our core wounds, but our potential as well. And my mother, there was incest in her childhood. My father was a PhD Harvard psychologist, A-line, A-list, brilliant man who didn't know how to feel and didn't know how to express feelings. They hadn't taught men that yet. Men hardly know that now. So my mother, who was a linguist, a professor, a PhD as well, very beautiful, brilliant woman, had always wanted a daughter. And I did a soul regression once when I went back into second term in my mom. And I realized I was in a dangerous place. My father wasn't a yeller or physically abusive to my mom. He just ignored her. And I also felt on a soul level that, God, how do I say? I wasn't the daughter that my mother desperately wanted. She was a Leo Latina, born in Mexico, raised in San Francisco. I knew I wasn't a girl. And there's a part of me that blamed myself for not being what she wanted, which was a reflection of that soul core wound of not feeling lovable by Source, by God. Right. So it wasn't her fault. She treated me as well as she knew how. She was a lovely woman. But we all have our crosses to bear, or what we came into this life to unwind or heal, to be free or to be awake, whatever that word is. Right. That was mine.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome, dear. Thanks for asking.
So before we get into the big stuff about what it is that you teach and all of that, I'd just like to ask you a couple of like little general questions.
Okay.
So aside from doing your star thing and all of that to protect yourself, what else do you do? Do you have a morning routine that you do, or a daily practice aside from meditate? Well, not aside from, I presume you include that in your routine, as most of us do. But what do you do to keep your vibrations raised high every day?
You know, again, the spiritual is so vast, it's ephemeral, it's so spiritual. But the physical has to be attended to in all of our properties as a human, to incorporate or to integrate or to embody spirit. So the way that I see this is that we have 4 primary pillars that support the foundation of our lives. Certainly spiritual, absolutely physical, absolutely emotional, and absolutely mental that I know have to be attended to on a daily basis to
Yeah.
stay healthy and whole. I'm a really physical guy. I've been a specimen. I've been an athlete all of my life. I stretch. I go to the swimming pool 3 times a week. I ride a bike. Cardio is mandatory for me. And it's one of the things I've termed as my constitutional. And I believe all humans have 2 or 3, maybe 4 constitutionals that are basic to their self-care sanity. That it's up to you. If you don't eat, if you don't sleep, if you don't meditate, if you don't wipe, if you don't do basic stuff, your life starts to tilt. You start to go crazy.
Yeah.
Especially I've learned meditation is the cornerstone and foundation of my life.
Yeah.
I've tried to live
for
without
everybody.
It's the foundation that allows everything else to work. I'm physically active. I breathe. I walk. Not over the top, but I know how to attend to my body after all of these years.
Mm.
I listen to frequency music. I listen to things that are uplifting. I don't eat, chicken feet or pork lips or pork rind. I don't eat bad food. I try and take in what's good for me physically. I take in good sounds. I read good things. I hang out with good people. I speak good things. I try and create that equanimity and seamlessness from my spirit through the juice of my loins, through the very physicality of my body every day. I attend to it like it's only up to us whether we take care of ourselves or not. It's our responsibility. And I've learned to do this from not having done it.
Yeah.
Basically.
So important. Self-love, self-care, all of that. Absolutely huge advocate for it. So absolutely wonderful. And looking after, the mind, the body, and the soul is so important. And all of those elements that come into it. Yeah. So
truly
fantastic. Have you got, you mentioned reading there. Have you got a favorite spiritual book?
I'm reading a really good book by Christina Toomey. It's called In Search of Buddha's Daughters.
Okay.
And it's a woman, I think she's British. She's a highly accomplished and awarded journalist, is reported around the world. And usually atrocities, right? I mean, that's what the news is.
Yeah.
Has a spiritual practice of her own and has researched really, and this is not unusual, it's changing, it's not unusual, the lower class status of nuns in the Tibetan and the Buddhist traditions.
Okay.
They're the ones who are waking up early, taking care of the monks. They're the ones who are scrubbing. They're the ones who are doing the grunt work. Sound familiar, ladies? And this is changing. And the Dalai Lama, after hearing of the plight of Tibetan Buddhists, nuns, said, "You can come to me." He started crying when he first had an audience with one of the Shodruns about how deep the inequality is. Inequality is inequality. Is that the word? Lack of equality. Thank you. So I love reading about trials and tribulations. I love redemption stories. And there's an interesting aside. I'm hetero to my core, no question. However, my emotional body is very feminine, not effeminate, and almost to a one. All of my spiritual teachers and mentors have been strong, kick-ass women, to a one. They've been the ones, ironically and paradoxically, that have shown me how to be a conscious man.
Right.
Just through how many women have you heard of that you know yourself as well, that left families, kids, husbands, jobs, homes to quest to discover their power or their gifts? Women, as is not unusually stated, are the wave of awakening, the feminine, conscious feminine is the wave of awakening consciousness on this planet. Not to tilt the scales like we're all going to be following the goddess, although that is my primary source stream in some ways, but to create sacred union, to awaken the feminine and the masculine, to be more conscious as men to outpicture to women what a conscious man is. And we're the new millennium men. We're the prototypes, as are you. There's no, your mother or grandmother. I mean, Indian, what a life you've lived. What a life women have that has just happened in a very, very short amount of generational years. It's really been my primary teacher is the beloved, is Shekinah, is Sophia.
Okay, thank you for that. On your website, it says, I'm going to read this, essential in your journey of awakening is empowering your sacred, regardless of your gender, beliefs, or past history. Empowering your sacred creates the foundation to consciously explore and develop your masculinity in entirely new and amazing ways. So talk to us about the journey to awaken your sacred masculine and exactly what that means. Is it, as we kind of discussed from my memory, about balance, about the feminine embracing her masculine side as well as her feminine side, and the male embracing both sides too, so that it creates equilibrium?
You got it. You got it. You're right on point. You know, I didn't have any role models. Jesus Christ was not a great role model, one, because he got strung up for it. And very few men, and I'll speak to the different points of this question. Very few men are in conscious relationship with their complementary self. Up until now, it's been the opposite sex. The opposite part of our nature is our feminine, which is equally as important. Try walking around on one leg or having only one hand. So men have denied, and no fault to us, feeling. And without feeling, the mind gets way out of balance, which is obvious in our world's political, economic, ecological realities. I'm not making men wrong, but it was engaged, and the information, this is not an info download we're doing. We're really doing a transmission. And people hear the words, Allie, but they feel the feeling more innately or more viscerally in their DNA that only comes from encountering and healing our shadow men. All the stuff, and this is for women as well, all the stuff that we have to stuff, deny, cut off from, because it's too painful to deal with. Certainly as children, we have experiences in the world that are just, can't integrate it. So we have to shelve it and stuff it behind. Men have millennia of emotions we've never been able to feel. We couldn't have kicked ass and conquered the world had we been feeling our feelings at the time. You can't take someone's life in the most horrific ways if you're feeling what they're feeling. It's impossible. So however evolution, the planet, has ripened to this apex point, what I call the turning of the ages. We are in that crux. We either go extinct or we evolve. And I don't think everyone on the planet is going to evolve in the ways that we're spending our lifetime doing. So I was very fortunate, again, grace and fate, and I believe this, that spirit speaks most personally to us through our personal relationships. And I've been fortunate to know women who guided me. I had to follow the trail. They didn't wait for me. I had to hold on to the tow rope and keep moving forward. Who directed me to a esoteric healing, for instance, was a woman I lived with in Asheville, North Carolina in the early 90s, who got me to move to Sedona, or got me to study with this fellow, Robert Jaffe, MD, no, Ibrahim Jaffe, at the School of Energy Mastery in 96, where I moved from Asheville, North Carolina. While there, I met a woman, Nicole Christine. She's since passed. Same birthday, day after Boxing Day, 17 years my senior. A woman that had been holding circles for women for 8 or 9 years in Southern Arizona, Tucson and Phoenix, who had developed in part through the auspices of the Fellowship of Isis, Awakening the Priestess process, which is Awakening the Sacred Feminine, a 9-month gestation journey. I was invited into that first group for men in Sedona in '96, Awakening the Priest process,
Okay.
which was my first intro to an amazing body of information from a very strong conscious woman, how to awaken my sacred masculine.
Okay. So what kind of things did you learn there? So to be more in touch with your emotions, to be more sensitive?
You get to that from addressing the part that has kept us from being sensitive or in touch with our emotions,
Okay.
which
So
is shadow work. And when I got involved with this group, it was like spiritual bling. Sedona certainly was a mecca of the new age and all this stuff. It still is to a point.
Yeah.
Maybe Glastonbury, but that's a whole nother decades rich. I thought it was cool. I thought I'd be like, spiritual man and say, it kicked my ass, excuse me. It was showing me all the places in myself that I had believed the lies that I had believed about myself, and the lies that I was telling people about myself, because I hadn't gotten in touch with myself, though I had been meditating for a lot of years. It's all that proverbial peeling of the onion.
Right.
And I had to learn how to communicate. I had to learn how to listen.
My dogs are barking. Sorry, listeners.
Okay, there we go.
When we're recording live, we have to deal with these.
I
don't know what they're barking at. So, sorry about that, everybody.
No worries.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fascinating. And so when a woman is looking at the masculine, then what kind of things is she looking to bring up?
If you ask 10 people, 5 people, what are your masculine, regardless of the gender that you're asking, what are your feminine qualities? What are your masculine qualities? People aren't going to come up with quick answers because we've never been asked this. We haven't identified our basic nature.
I wouldn't have a clue.
So the feminine, receptive, nurturing, compassionate, courageous, to be sure. What other qualities would you highlight to answer that, or your feminine qualities, Allie?
It's not something, as you say, that I've thought about. It's not something, that I've ever thought about.
Right. Well, most people haven't.
Yeah.
So we can't actually address what we haven't identified.
Yeah. But is it qualities that people assume from a sex, like gender point of view, that are masculine or feminine?
I think to a degree. However, and we live in helter-skelter times. Your grandmother couldn't even say internet. I know she had the wheel back then, but you didn't have any of the awarenesses on a global personal level that is now becoming commonplace. However, these basic core qualities are still pretty much of a mystery for people.
Yeah.
And, there's a guy is a guy, woman is a woman. What makes them what they are? And interestingly enough, that physicality, a woman's genitalia is coming in, a man's genitalia is going out. Part of the masculine drive is to step into the world, is to produce, is to create, is to do stuff. I'm being general, but it's true. A woman is more nurturing, she's more receptive. She creates a space for home, for healing, that's innate to her physical energy as well as just the nature. And mind you, this is not gender specific. There are very, very, as you know, dominant, over the top masculine women and very effeminate men who are more in their feminine aspects. Right. The idea is to find equanimity and balance where they are supporting each other. It's like the reason you have a best friend, or hopefully your husband, is that you get along, you feed each other, you hang out, you support each other to be stronger. Yeah. Bingo. That's the idea. However the balance and ratio is, feminine and masculine, is so that there is a complementary merging and symbiotic support, that all parts of self are on the same page, which is to more love, more joy, more to celebrate, more to create in a positive, fortuitous way. That's, I think, the goal here.
So you now help people to do this. So what types of people generally would come to you? Are they more women, or are they more men?
You know, this has been a challenging thing for me. It had been at a time. Again, my primary supporters and allies tend to be women my age or a little bit older. I've always had older women friends.
But your clients, so I'm talking about your clients, for example.
Yeah, okay. And I'm going to get to that, but this is a parallel. Most of the people that respond back to my posts are women, almost exclusively. So I'm speaking a language that is a little far ahead of the curve. I'm not special. I'm not putting myself on any pedestal. But by being in the company and care, as well as, I wouldn't say under the fist, but under the thumb of a couple of women mentors, I was given advantages or a head start, perhaps in some ways, in incorporating and balancing my basic innate nature, which is masculine and feminine. So most men, and this is not a denigrative, negative comment, I've gone through Mankind Project a bit, I've gone through Bradshaw work a bit, I've gone through men's work a bit, I've held circles with men. When you start to talk about embracing the feminine, when you start to talk about the heart space, it's kind of like, you know, when you ask your dog a really tough question and the dog goes, he's looking at you kind of funny, like, what are you asking me? This is a language that most men really aren't conversant with, I've found. So they don't come really on their own. I think most men awaken because we've been left by women. And it's obvious that what we're doing isn't creating more love in our life or connection. That's been the impetus. A lot of my growth is the suffering from having pushed love away. So.
Okay. So are you saying then that men who have suffered in relationships and then find themselves single, through the hurt and the pain that they've gone through in their relationships, would be a lot of the males that would be coming to you for your assistance?
To a degree. I mean, that's overstating it. I think we only take a step forward in our evolution when where we've been standing isn't working any longer.
Okay.
The reason I eat is because I'm hungry. The reason I sleep is because I'm tired. And I was really, 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 really blessed in my upbringing. I believe, I truly trust I've had a soul directive in this life. Otherwise, I would have gone into being a salesman or an actor or something where I could have made a lot of money. But I went into the healing arts to really unwind the enormity of what's always gotten in the way of me being happy. And it takes it takes a bit of a lunatic, which is why sages or some spiritual people historically have been a little bit nuts or a little bit extreme. Is what is that drive that keeps putting you into the fire of transformation? To keep looking at the one thing that has kept you from being free. It's really, you gotta be a masochist. You gotta be a bit nuts to keep going into the cauldron of awakening by encountering your pain or your fear or your loneliness or your addiction or your anger. It takes a special sort to do that, in fact, or a unique one anyway.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. What else did I want to ask you? I wanted to ask you about, you know, that you went through your own journey of self-healing, as you've said, transforming the considerable woundology of your past. What steps did you take specifically for yourself that helped to heal you and get you to a space where you are now, I guess, where you're happy with your life and you're able to help others in the way that you do? If it makes sense.
You know, I had to want it. I had to want to love. I had to want to be less messed up. Can't use the F word. I had to want it.
And if you want. I'm Irish, for goodness sake.
Well, I know there are kids in the house. I don't want to offend them. The dogs will start howling again. Who knows? You might have puppies. But I had to want it. I had to have an intention. In the universe, this is a very shamanic 101 basic truth. The universe is always in conversation with itself. Your knee is always in conversation on some level with your ankle or your hip or your head. There's a lot of things that are connecting you in your human experience, in your human body. So and really it's the thirst. Nothing else has worked out for me, honey. I tried really hard to find love in this world, and I found that I kept pushing it away because of this basic misbelief, this conditioned twist in my belief system that I wasn't lovable. And I don't know, grace and fate drove me, and life kept giving me the people, the healing situations, and that's a piece I'll touch on in a moment. I bartended for 10 hardcore years, where I'd start work at 8 at night, get off at 4 in the morning, and then party till 9 or 10 or noon. I did enough drugs to buy South America in the 80s. And I was at a crashing point. I was bartending on South Beach in 89, and my mother was in Vienna with my eldest brother and died. She had her third, what's called a gastrointestinal bleed.
Okay.
Alcohol, and she died. And I realized, and interestingly enough, intuitively, I knew to start taking massage classes in the early 80s in New York City, knowing that I would have to transition. All of my friends were bartenders, about 15 years older than me, who didn't bartend because it was a living. It was bartending because that's what they were. They were through and through bar. And there's a whole nightlife mentality, obviously, that goes into that, certainly in New York in the 80s. So intuitively, I knew to start looking for an exit strategy. Ended up, I was doing a part-time shiatsu program in New York, and I opened a restaurant in 85 that blew I was doing karate, and I was trying to stabilize my life. I was also snorting as much coke and drinking as much tequila as I could too. I had to contend with both of these parts. So when I moved to Miami in 87, thank you for listening, it took me a year before I went to massage school. And it was right about that time that my mom died. And I made the jump. And massage, I was making a third doing massage and I was bartending. But I knew I needed to change my lifestyle. I knew I needed to get off out of the bars and the nightclubs. And the universe kept giving me the next step. Energy work, became a Reiki master. It kept giving me that next door. I had to go through the door, but I kept following the trail that has brought me here. And the irony and the perversity and the perfection of the divine is that the more love I called into my life, the more that was unloved in me flushed up in my life so I could love it to create more love in my life. But I didn't get like a beach ball size of ecstasy to lick every day to feel more love. I had to do the work. I had to embrace my sadness and addiction and suffering in the ways that I've learned in my heart space, and not just physical heart chakra, but my high heart. Yeah. And call in my team, to create sacred ceremony in my life to help me address the shit of my life.
So how long have you been clean now?
Oh, I still have a beer now and then again. I still have a puff now and then again. Okay. Great story. I was living in Sedona in 204, 205, a dear friend of mine, a psychic, a teacher, she said, Keith, you've got a break for a minimum of 3 years. Nothing can you ingest that's of a substance. Coffee, yeah, that's one thing else. But I had to break completely. She said, if you do that successfully, what I'm hearing is what she's saying to me, that you'll be able to come back in a more sovereign place and choose or not choose.
Yeah.
And I'm few and far between, is that I'm no longer running the current of leading with need, which is one of the cornerstones to addiction, is you can't help it. I never said no to Coke for a decade. If I had the money, I spent it. I borrowed it. I couldn't say no. And that was this is the irony, again, paradox. Our greatest wound is our greatest doorway to healing and freedom and wholeness. But you got to confront it. You got to go into it. So, I love my Hefeweizen. I love my red wine.
Yeah.
Not to the point, I only do what I love. If I don't love it, if it's not making me love what I'm doing, I don't do it.
Yeah. So you went through the 3 years, did you?
A little bit longer. I was living on Ibiza, oddly enough.
Weird. What a weird place to go do that.
Paradox. I went for 6 days and stayed for 4 years.
Okay.
In 2007.
Yeah. So now you can just take it or leave it. Yeah.
My alignment and my point of reference isn't through my neediness anymore.
Mm.
And as you empower your heart space and connect it to source and ground it into the earth, it becomes the dominant reference point in life. And that's the power, and that's the work I do, and that's why I do it. If I could have gotten here any other way, through any other chakra, let alone any other activity, I would have done it. This has been a lot of frickin' work, but it's the only thing that's paid off.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question I wanted to ask you was, being an energy healer, do you work with people online for energy healings and things like that?
I do. I'm putting together a course now. I have clients in the East Coast in Europe. Absentee healing or long distance healing is in some ways not quite as effective, but it's if alignment is clear, higher self to higher self, if that person is present, that person is in their alignment, etherically working off body, which is what energy work is, is as effective than if I'm in your company.
Yeah, I'm an energy healer too.
Obviously, it's immediate. But yeah, I do that. I'm doing that.
But I just wanted to know, so when you're doing it, are you, so say I'm here, I'm lying on my couch, you're sitting in your sitting room at home, are you going through each of the chakras, the main chakras, and clearing them out?
Indeed. Yeah. And we have a consultation beforehand. Yeah. I always say this, in fact, in opening friendships, people that I meet, as well as people that I work with, one of the very first things I say, Allie, is I insist that you, if you can, at any moment, in every moment, that you own your voice with me. You tell me exactly what you need me to hear. You tell me exactly what you need to say. I will listen to you. I'll do my best to comply. So right away, there's a hard, fast agreement that I'm here to serve you, not on you or to you or for you, but with you. My gift is empowering you to empower yourself. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you have to be honest and tell me, and this is a co-creative affair, co-creative exchange. And when I align with my higher self to your higher self, I ask that you do the same. And as with any practitioner, modalities are important, techniques are important, but the bottom line is how clear, aligned, and through me, not from me, that my field is supporting you in your field. This isn't personal, it's not specific. This is one of the crazy making things when I was first in healing school. in any school program, there's a curriculum and there's steps and there's a procedure and a healing dynamic, the activity. And so at one point, the step off point is then you step, after you've done your healing techniques and whatever, and this isn't body work, this is energy work, you step back to allow spirit to do its thing. And I'm like, looking at my watch, I'm like, okay guys, come on, let's go. Spirit, let's do the work. It doesn't work that way. There's a surrender and a let go that's as important as connecting all the dots in someone's field. I've studied esoteric healing. We spoke of this when we did our private interview. It comes through the Alice Bailey channeled work. You're the protege in the Theosophical tradition. Esoteric healing is a gorgeous system. And that's another conversation. We can talk energy healing if you like the specifics. And the advanced energy healing work in Sedona was based on a technique called ART, awareness release technique. That if you hold an issue or, let's say, an emotional break in your heart space that's been expanded by higher self heart space or spiritual heart spaces, you've called in angels, guides, and masters to create a field of awareness. That's what does the healing, is holding. It's like your little kids. You can say, I love you. And what are their names, just so I know?
My children?
One of them.
Joel and Ella.
Joe, okay. I love you, Joe. As you're a woman, you're a wife, you want to be held. You want to feel safe. You want to, oh man. Holding our pain is an extraordinary act of courage. But that's the only thing that does the healing. Love is the only thing that heals. It's not an emotional love. It's a frequency of sacred.
Yeah.
And I've learned, like you, the techniques that open the field, that connect to the field. In esoteric healing, the 3 A's: align, higher self, attune to the field, attune to the higher self, the other, and then allow. You step back and let the current run. And just to talk logistics of that particular system that's so gorgeous, is each chakra by design has its own body part, systems, and glands that it alone sends life force to. It's supremely organized and supremely simple. So if there's a problem with the legs or the reproductives, you can look to the second chakra, because the second chakra in this system, I think it's universal, directs the flow of life force to the legs and the reproductives. If there's an emotional issue of anger, it's the liver, which holds anger, which is governed by the solar plexus. So it's opening up the field, each chakra, to allow more life force, not just physically, etherically, but to the emotional and mental body of, say, the liver as well. It's not just an etheric field, it's also an emotional and mental body field.
Yeah.
That has to be addressed. And most people's chakras, Allie, are not in concert or not in harmony. The etheric is moving one way, the emotional moving the other way, the mental is, unless they're in a consistent, in concert, in flow, you're going to have, kind of a funky field, or a less radiant or open or free. I'm sure you've known people that are more evolved or more awake than others. Mm-hmm. There's an openness and a freedom to them. They're not running their head shit on you. They're not like trying to jam you with their power issues or their insecurity. There's a spaciousness. There's an ease to them because there isn't so much schmutz or energy in their emotional or mental bodies. Yeah. Flowing, breaking down that continuous life force flow.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Me too.
Okay, so I know you've touched a little bit on heart work and all of that, but you've got heart tantra.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that? It's kind of a little oxymoron, because in the West we get hoochie coochie with that.
Yeah.
It's about being, and I studied at a temple in Sedona, Baba Dez, who was famous / infamous. He had a temple there, 9 bedrooms that I lived and worked and learned sacred spot work. which is very particular and specific with men and women. Tantra, by definition, means to weave and a tool. There may be other definitions, but primarily when you think of Eastern or Taoist or Mantak Chia is a big name, it's more scientific. It's not about acting the goddess or acting the god. It's about running current, about running energy, ideally with one primary partner to develop an affinity in the field. This is the most gorgeous video. I've never seen this before. It kind of came through. This is Tantra. And it's not just sexual, it's life force, it's friends. So you have one energy moving, one person, you have one person's energy moving. This is Tantra. Boom.
Yeah.
When it hits that fusion point, you get an exponential potential where the sum is greater than the parts. You hit that lift that can only happen with another field. So Heart Tantra is bringing that healing current and that reference point and the focus and the characteristics to the qualities of the heart. Love, joy, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and trust. That's my code. That's my principles and values. So Heart Tantra is kind of an oxymoron, kind of sort of. It's kind of like, what does that mean? It's weaving in the heart energies that I just mentioned: love, joy, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and trust.
Okay.
Through the juice of your loins. It's loving from your heart, which is connected to your soul, which is a whole lot more fun than just going for the grind. And it's a way of addressing the parts of our system, our pain body, say, our woundology, say, that I found is the most effective way to transform and to create healing is through the power of the heart. Voila.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, so my last question to you then is, would you like to tell the listeners what specific services that you do provide, online and offline if you do both, and where best they can reach you, whether you've got a YouTube, a website, Facebook, all of those good stuff, so that if somebody wants to avail of your services and speak with you, that they can do so.
Okay, so first of all, I want to interject. I've been on a number of interview shows, sweetheart, and you are the best.
Oh, thank you.
You're really good. Thank you for asking. I mean, these questions are like, this is what I would ask. AwakenYourSacred.com is my website. A little bit dated, although not really. It's more about awakening the sacred masculine in men and women. It is an initiatory journey. I post on Facebook. I do long distance absentee sessions now. Again, about ready to move to Kauai. I love working in groups. I love working with men as well as women, and especially in sacred union.
Okay, is it online or is that?
I haven't put the program together yet. I'm in this life change chapter.
Yeah.
But Awaken Your Sacred, there's a contact form there. I can be reached, and perhaps we'll have this address on your posting.
Yeah.
On Facebook.
Send me whatever you want. It can go up on the YouTube. Yeah, for sure.
And I respond to everybody.
Yeah.
And we always sit and have a conversation. This work is not for everybody. And I always turn it back to you is, how can I serve what you came here for? How can I help you be a better you in ways that work best for you? And I found that when I this is the secret to the sacred masculine, Allie. It's going from me to we.
Yeah.
And unless a man serves a higher purpose, unless I serve a higher purpose in my own wants, wishes, desires, and needs, I become addictive, angry, despondent, depressed. A man, the masculine life force, men and women, have to serve the need of the tribe in some way, shape, or form. I have to be of service. That's core. It's also core to, for instance, the code of the round table. To reawaken and live from respect, integrity, and honor. And from my heart, and from my feelings and my feminine nature combined seamlessly in how I live my life. So, you know, it's always working with where people are, and it's always very simple. What do you want more of in your life? That's the first question. What do you want more of? What's the feeling you want to feel more of? You're going to have better days and other days. That's part of being human, but your baseline consciousness, what would you like that to be most of all? What's your soul want? The other question is, what's kept you from that?
Yeah.
What fear, what anger, what addiction, what lack of, it's not self-worth, it's self-unworth. And as you address that and you embrace it, it transforms into your highest ally. And I help people get present. I help people breathe. Sounds simple, but most people are
They don't take
relatively
it breathe.
clueless.
Most people don't know.
Right. Right. Very simple stuff. It is simple. It's not always easy, but the most profound is the simplest I've found in life.
Perfect.
Yeah, you too.
Well, thank you so much, Keith Gregory. Thank you for
Yay.
being here with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. And my nickname for you is Allie, oh my, because you are an oh my. And I'm sure you must have had people say that to you, like, oh my, I love that. And you are, and I really appreciate your sisterhood. And I appreciate how you show up, because I've been watching your interviews, and there's a strength in you that I love. There's also a big time woman, feminine thing that I love. Not to mention your hair. Thank you, Allie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we will say namaste for now and goodbye to the listeners. We will see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.
Yay! Love to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to comment on the YouTube video for Keith. Thank you, everyone.